Hi ladies, this is part one of a study about affirmations, and I want to get right off the bat with answering a really good question. I've had several people bring up to me the question of, are affirmations really biblical? Like, sure, I could say biblical pornography, like you could slap that statement on anything, but are they truly biblical? Because they sound, from what I've seen, that there are like a new age psychology sort of thing. And so are they really safe? Are they really biblical? So if you've been thinking that there is wisdom in asking that question, don't ignore those questions when they come up. It's really important that we get questions like that answered. And so that's what I want to do in part of this video. In this series, I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about what affirmations are, how they can help us, and how to practically use them, and obviously why they are scriptural. So let's go ahead and get started. So let's look at our first verse. The Proverbs 18:21 says, the tongue has the power of life and death. And that means the words we speak out loud have an effect on our lives, right? So if I speak death, or I speak negativity, or I speak positivity and love and truth, that affects the way my life goes. I mean, just think about a child. Like, if I speak harshly to my child constantly and berate them, they're going to be pretty dysfunctional as they grow up to be adults. But if I speak words of life and truth and positivity over them, like when they fail, I don't go, well, you should have tried harder. Or, hey, this is an opportunity. You can know how to do it better next time. The way we speak has an influence on the way our life goes, right? And that has to do with our thought life, and it has to do with what we've stored up in our heart. So affirmations are powerful statements we can say and think that are true and positive. Now, while affirmations seem like a 20th century invention, I think they started becoming popular in 1980 from a certain psychologist, God has been using I am statements since the burning bush with Moses in Exodus 3:14. God appears to Moses in the form of a burning bush, and he says, go to the children of Israel. And Moses asks God, who am I supposed to say sent me? And God says, I am that I am. He uses an I am statement right off the bat. Like, that's how God describes himself. And so even before that, we see God using different statements to describe his character to people, and how his people use these types of phrases to describe him. So this is a very biblical idea. It goes back to even Abraham. Okay, so if we look at Genesis 17:1, Abraham and God are talking, and God describes himself, and he says, I am the all-sufficient one. And then we see in Genesis 16:13, Hagar calls God the God who sees me. So these are affirmations. Affirmations are not new, but they are biblical, and they've been used for centuries as a way to affirm somebody's character and identity. Okay, so they are not new. Science or psychology is just beginning to scratch the surface on all the amazing things God has done and uses, and we can't let them here, say, look at this cool thing we invented. We're like, no, let's look at the Bible. God's been doing this for a while. Great, I'm glad you found it, but this isn't a new thing, okay? So taking a cue from the Bible, we should speak the identity God gives us over ourselves, similarly to how God speaks his identity to us. Okay? So this is an extremely scriptural idea. For Christians, it's important that we make sure the affirmations we speak align with God's word. Okay? Why? Because when we repeat affirmations verbally and internally, which you're already doing this and you might not even know it, we are renewing our mind to these phrases, okay? So if you've ever, for a negative point of view, if you've ever looked in the mirror and said, oh, I'm overweight, oh, I'm fat, I'm ugly, those are negative affirmations. We do this naturally as human beings. Sorry, my legs. We do this naturally as human beings. It's just the way we're wired, okay? And so they're in the Bible, and this is something we do just naturally, and that's a negative version of an affirmation, okay? So we begin renewing our mind to it, and so that every single time we look in the mirror, we think, I'm ugly, I'm fat, nobody wants me, and it just kind of goes on from there. So when we renew our mind to something, we create and strengthen neural pathways in our brain. And this is called neuroplasticity, if you've not ever heard of it. This makes it easier for us to believe a repeated phrase over time, okay? So for example, the bad one, the negative one, I am ugly. Every single time, then you look in the mirror, oh, I'm ugly, and you find another reason. Oh, look at the bags under my eyes. Oh, I'm getting older. Look at these lines on my face. Oh, I've got gray hair. You begin to reaffirm the idea in your brain, and you strengthen a neural pathway, okay? So it's a way to, using affirmations in a positive way and in a scriptural way, we harness the power of our brain to benefit our faith. And that's what I really want you to get. When we use affirmations, we're harnessing the innate power of our brain that God gave us to benefit our faith. And God actually tells us to do this in His Word, okay? So let's take a moment and just kind of review what are affirmations, okay? They are statements that we can make about ourselves that are true and positive, okay? That's the way I want you to think of affirmations. We don't want to be doing these negative affirmations when we look in the mirror and we're like, oh, there's a pile of trash in the mirror, and you're talking about yourself, right? Okay. So simple examples of affirmations are, I am loved. Look at John 3:16 and all over the Bible. Or I trust God. Those are simple affirmations that you can speak over yourself in situations maybe where you feel unloved or where you're like struggling to trust God, right? So these affirmations help us restate core beliefs that we want to solidify in our minds and our hearts. We want to use affirmations to help us in these three different areas. So let me give you some examples, okay? So number one, we can use affirmations when we fully believe a phrase to reaffirm this idea as a core belief. So I want to believe that God is faithful. And I believe that, but I want it to like sink down deep so that whenever I encounter a situation where it looks like God's not faithful, I'm going to be, nope, God's faithful. I trust Him. I'm not worried. God provides all my needs. So we can use it to reaffirm something we already believe, to turn it into a core belief, something that has sunk down deep, that is unwavering, okay? 2, we can use affirmations when we are standing in faith and don't yet fully believe the phrase, but we are actively working on the full acceptance of the phrase. For example, I was talking to a girlfriend about fasting the other day, and I told her, fasting requires all of my emotional resources. And she challenged me. She says, no, it doesn't. You're believing a lie. And I went, well, oh. And I had to think about it because, well, no, that was an absolute. That's right. It doesn't require all of my emotional resources. And I prayed about it, and the Lord's like, it doesn't have to be that way. And she said, it doesn't have to be that way. Fasting isn't, like, that's not what it's supposed to do. And so that's a hurdle I now have to get over, and I can speak this affirmation over myself, is fasting doesn't require all of my emotional resources. It doesn't. And so, do I fully believe that yet? No, but I'm working on the full acceptance of the phrase, okay? And the third way we can use affirmations is when we don't believe the phrase. For example, if you don't believe you are loved, but you know the phrase is true, and we want to train ourselves to believe the phrase. So back when I was a teenager, some of you might have heard my story, I believed I was completely unlovable. And then I encountered God, and He and I was suicidal, and he totally took away the spirit of suicide from me. He delivered me from it completely. And after that, I could just see in his word how loved I am. And so because I hadn't believed that for so long, I had to renew my mind to this idea that I am loved, even when I didn't believe it. And so now I'm like, I know I'm loved. Like, I know I'm not just loved by God. I am loved by a lot of other people. So now it's not a problem, and it doesn't hinder me or trip me up anymore because I do fully believe the phrase. So that's another way we can use affirmations to help build our faith. So when we say affirmations, particularly aloud, because when we speak, the tongue holds the power of life and death, right? When we speak them aloud, we're creating new neural pathways that help us to believe the statement or phrase, okay? And so, yeah, you can think it in your head, that's true. But there's actually been some scientific research done that when you speak it out loud, it strengthens it even more, the neural pathway in your head when you speak it out loud, okay? So why would we want to do this? Many of us have emotional, oh, you know what? I'm going to pause this and I'm going to get started on this in the next video.